Hola, everyone. Yeah. Happy Cinco de Mayo. 5th of May. Or 5 May. 5 of May. Yes, this is a great celebration for Mexican people. I always thought, incorrectly by the way, that this was like 4th of July, that this was Independence Day from Spain. But it's not true. This was the day of a great battle. And I've forgotten the name of it. San Pueblo, I think it's called. The Battle of San Pueblo. Or Puebla. Puebla. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's not quite the same. It would be like us celebrating some battle rather than... We could. The Battle of Manassas Day. We could have that. We could have that. But it's a very important day. It's been commercialized, like all things have, and changed into something else, a day of drinking and celebrating and so forth. Actually, I always thought it was by Cuervo or somebody, had come up with this idea. But actually, in reading about it, I found out that it was Anheuser-Busch who came up with the idea for making this into a day of drinking and celebration that way. Wouldn't you know it? About 51 years ago, that was when that began. Changing the idea of it all. Okay, now, it's also another holiday, and this is the Orthodox Easter. This is called Pascha. Pascha means Passover. That's where it comes from. Pesha, and it's from Passover. Pascha. So, Natasha, would you tell us what is the formal greeting that everyone gives to one another? What do they say? Say it again for us. And that means Cristo Voskres. And then when somebody says this to you, what do you say in return? You say, hello. Yeah. Yeah. We'll find out in a moment. Which means it's true. He is alive. Yeah. Yeah, he is risen. So, yeah, and it's Easter all week. Yeah. 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 So, that's the difference in traditions. So why are they at different times of the year? Well, I thought I'd look that up too as well. The reason they fall at different places because Easter is what's called a movable feast. It occurs after the first full week after the first full moon after the vernal or the spring equinox. So when the spring equinox comes, then there's whenever the full moon comes after that, then the first week becomes the week of Easter, and it ends on the following Sunday. Here's where it gets difficult. What if you're using different calendars? What if you're calculating differently? In most churches and in most countries now, we use what's called the Gregorian calendar, put together by a group of people under the time of Pope Gregory. So it's called the Gregorian calendar, and the reason was because time was starting to shift further and further off, and it was getting off. Because every 400 years or so, there was about a 2-week gap in when the first of the year came because of the way the calendar was calculated. It gets complicated. However, they made this shift back, and then they just held it there, and it's changed almost permanently. I say almost because there's minutes and seconds involved here as far as the year goes. As you can see, if you're calculating something that occurs on a fixed date, which is the vernal equinox, that's a fixed date. We know where that occurs as far as the length of the days and the nights go. That occurs at the same place or near the same place every year. That's a fixed date. From that fixed date, then, you go into a lunar calendar because it's the first full moon afterwards. And that full moon can be different if you're using different calendars. The first fixed date on the Gregorian for the equinox falls on March 21st. But March 21st falls 13 days later on the old calendar, the Julian or the Julius Caesar calendar. See how this gets confusing here? So now, as it happened this year, the first full moon fell on, or somewhere around March the 24th or so, and that meant that the first full week ended on on March 31st. So those in Western cultures celebrated Easter on March 31st. Here we are this far away, May the 5th. Why? Because if you take that 13 days and you shift it forward, then that means that that first full moon happened before the old calendar's vernal equinox. So now you've got a new vernal equinox, 13 days later. It's already shifted and it's off, but you're using an old calendar and that's the way it goes. You take that date, wait for the next full moon, which would not be the one that happened in March, but the one that happened in April. So then you go from April, which had occurred on April 25th this year, that was the full moon, and you move forward 1 week, and here we are, May the 5th. Okay, having said all that, what that got me thinking about was this idea of fixed feasts or fixed days and movable days. You know, we have some feasts or holy days that are fixed. December 25th is always Christmas, and that day then moves around, but the date stays the same. The same occurs with the equinox. The day may move around, but the time still always stays the same. But there are other things that are movable, and they move around. Feast days, especially this one. If you're working with two different calendars, then they move even further apart sometimes, and sometimes they coincide and sometimes they don't. Now this isn't even including Passover, from which it all came from to begin with, which is based on a completely different calendar and a different way of reckoning time. Sometimes they all coincide, sometimes they're close together, sometimes they bunch together, sometimes they're spread out like they were this time. It's gotten me thinking about the way we do our lives. Things in our lives that are fixed, things in our lives that are movable, things that we celebrate at some times in our lives, and at other times it's not that big a deal. We all do this. Birthdays, celebrations, anniversaries with former spouses that were once important and now they're no longer fixed. They are definitely movable. Move it on out. All that sort of thing happens in life. It happens to each and every one of us. But in this case, as in these holidays, there are still remembered by certain peoples depending on their tradition. And we do the same thing within our own minds and hearts and in our bodies as well. We have these traditional ways of looking at life. Traditional ways of hanging on to certain things, regardless of where the rest of the world has gone. We do it, each and every one of us. We do it with things we like, and we do it with things that we didn't like or that weren't that pleasant. I'll give you some idea of an example of some fixed things, some that we like and some that we don't like. Well, I mentioned birthdays. Birthdays. Everyone had their birthday. It is a fixed date. It's not going to change unless you're put into some kind of special program for witnesses or something like that. It's not going to change. You're going to have the same birthday, the same name, and so forth throughout your life. This is fixed. This is also usually fixed in a celebratory way until you reach a certain place where you don't want to celebrate it anymore. You want it to either stay extremely fixed or change it in some way. Or it no longer becomes that important to you. You don't want people to remember it and make a big deal out of it any longer. But what about the other side of that coin? What about the side of things that we don't like, or that remain important to us whether we want them to or not. Things that we can't get past. Things that we can't forgive. This is a big one for every one of us. Larger sometimes than we even realize. Things that become fixed in our nature. Things that happen and we don't necessarily remember the date that it happened, because that's movable depending on our mood. Depending on our mood. But what's fixed is the feeling around it. Now, many of you may say, well, yeah, I remember some things I couldn't forgive very well, but I've gotten on past that. You know, I've forgiven him, or I've forgiven her, or I've forgiven that incident, whatever that might be. But deep, deep, deep down inside ourselves, there may still be some remnant of this. That's why Jesus states to us in a very, very special way. He says, when you go and you bring your gift to the altar to be blessed, whatever this gift is, it was usually a dove or some grain or something like that. You bring it to the altar. Think first in your heart, is there anybody that I haven't forgiven? Is there anything that I've got that's still locked up inside of me? And if there is, go and reconcile that first, and then return with your gift to the altar. Why? Because it's the person we are that is receiving the gift of blessing. And if we're receiving a gift of blessing on a person that we are that is still holding some resentment or unforgiving nature within ourselves, we are compounding that. We are putting another layer of veneer on top of it to hide it from ourselves. So he is asking us to search deep within. You see, it's not really about coming and bringing a gift to an altar. It's about coming and bringing yourself to today, to the present moment. If you are bringing this flawed, unforgiving, maybe something that's way deep in your subconscious that you're not even aware of. If you're still bringing that to the present day, then you're bringing with you a fixed nature. You are making today the same as the day before. The day before. You're not really receiving the full blessing of the present moment. You see, that is the most fixed moment of all. It's the fixed feast of our life. It's the present moment. It's the one where we can enjoy all of life. It's the one where we are actually, that moment, it's the one moment when we are actually attuned to our true nature and attuned to the nature of God all at once. It's all one thing in that now present moment. The only place where God really exists. So if you're bringing to it something that is still flawed within yourself, then the gift that you bring, which is really you, is not fully blessed and fully forgiven in that moment. So he asks us to go. He says, if you have any of this, go and find that person and reconcile with them. Who is the person and where do we go? Oftentimes, that person is no longer part of our life. So it's not really about a real person. It's not about a flesh and blood person. It's about a feeling and a belief within ourselves. Something that we can really change. You know, I've done this many times in my life. I've come to realization that something I did was not right. That I had not been seeing things correctly in life. It may have been in a relationship with another person, or it may have been a decision that I made surrounding who knows, a used car deal or any number of things, something at work or anything. And when I realized, and I came to a realization when that thought floated back into my mind, usually during meditation or sometime when I was still and not thinking about other things, which is like mowing the lawn, raking the lawn, doing some repetitive thing where I'm just sort of, or it could be running, whatever it is, where you hit that zone. Thoughts come to you, memories come to you, and you suddenly realize, oh, I was in the wrong there. I didn't realize it then, but I do now. I need to ask for forgiveness from that other person. But that other person may be gone from this planet. It may have been a grandfather or a grandmother or a teacher or something. It's too long ago. How do I reconcile this? And that's the beauty. God knows no time or space. God is not dependent on active physical contact. Because spirit is always present and spirit is eternal. So at any given moment we can change our lives. We can reconcile ourselves and change a subliminally fixed moment deep within ourselves, in our subconscious. We can change that fixed moment into something that is now movable and fluid and free once more. We can, in our imagination, this power of imagination which is so strong, we can conjure up this person again and we can say to them, I see where my wrong was. I apologize. I'm sorry. I'll do better. And as we do, this person that we've conjured up, which is really the face of God appearing as this person, actually says to us, what are you talking about? It's gone. It's gone as though it never happened. That's true forgiveness. What are you seeing here? I'm seeing only good, but I always saw only good. That's the way God views it. Then we say to ourselves, good, it's done. And we can go into our lives and face each moment through our lives a little lighter, as though we have just experienced a holiday. A little Cinco de Mayo there, whatever it might be. We have experienced it in our lives, and we are changed. As we become changed, then we experience ourselves to others, and we express ourselves to others in a way that frees them as well. You see how wonderful this is? How balanced it is? This is God's plan. This is the true plan. That all of us experience life to the fullest. That each of us experience ourselves as we truly are. Perfect and blessed in every way. That's the way God wants it for us. And that's the way we can, if we will, see it for ourselves. God bless.